All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this overview of the Opioid Restitution Fund Community Grant proposal. Really excited that you all are here, and thank you for your interest in applying for these funds. I'm Sarah Whaley, the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Overdose Response, and I'm going to just give us like a quick overview of the agenda. So we'll do some welcomes and then go over a little bit of background on the grant and where kind of it all came from. We'll talk about the requirements for applying for the funds, and then talk about the application process, including the portal. We'll share a little bit about communications, and then have an opportunity for you all to ask any questions from our team, and that's the Mayor's Office of Overdose Response. And also on the call, we have the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. So that is what today is going to look like. For question and answer, if you could put those in the chat. We've got Brian and Lauren from the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs on the call, and they're going to be monitoring the chat. And just one more housekeeping announcement. The slides from today's session will be posted on the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs website, along with a recording of this training session. So if you want to go back and listen again, or share with someone who was unable to make it today, that will be available to you tomorrow. All right, so we're going to start with the welcomes. I'm going to introduce two folks to share a little bit with you today. We have two of our Restitution Advisory Board members. So the Restitution Advisory Board was created to help the city with this process of administering the opioid restitution funds. And so we have two members of the board here today. We have Charles McCleary and Paris Barnes. And I don't know who's going first, but they're going to say a few words.
I can go
Paris,
first.
go ahead. Oh, yeah. Charles, go.
Do you want to go first, Paris? It really doesn't matter. Good morning. As Sarah stated, my name is Charles McCleary. Now I'm a member of the Restitution Advisory Board, filling one of the lived experience seats. It's truly an honor to be in this position, because who knows better about the opioid crisis that's going on in Baltimore than someone who has been on both sides of it. I am a survivor of the heroin crisis that had plagued this city for years. I'm also a survivor of a lost loved one. My brother died to a fentanyl overdose 3 years ago. This past October made 3 years. So this is personal for me. I currently work as a peer recovery coach at a local health institution. So I get to see what fentanyl and other opioids are doing to our community on a daily basis. You know, the request for funds, the RFP, has been launched. It is the result of difficult work that has been done by the Restitution Board. It reflects our firsthand perspectives, both individually and collectively, as residents that has been impacted by this opioid crisis that has affected this city. Earlier this summer, the board came together to review the city's overdose strategic plan and to provide our input as citizens of this city who has experienced this crisis in our daily lives, whether directly or indirectly. Some of us have been affected directly, some of us have been affected indirectly through family members or friends or members of our community. Once these activities were identified, we thought through parameters and the RFP in partnership with the mayor's office. Afterward, we broke down the funding of awards into different tiers and sizes. We then proceeded with thoughtful consideration ways we can make this process as equitable and as efficient as possible, especially for smaller community organizations and partners. Now, with the RFP being live, we are prepared to review proposals as part of the process that you will hear about momentarily. We understand the urgency of getting these funds into our neighborhoods as soon as possible, and we encourage all organizations working to make a difference to consider applying in the upcoming weeks. Just as we, the members of the Restitution Advisory Board, has taken a stand to make a change in the current opioid crises, we encourage you, the community-based organization and partners, to take a stand and make a change in your immediate communities through the acquiring and utilization of the funds provided through the Opioid Restitution Fund. Thank you for your time and best wishes in your endeavors to bring about positive change in your respective communities.
Thank you. How do I follow that? So my name is Paris Barnes, and I hold the lived experience seat, and I am grateful to be a member of the board because we serve you. We are a group of individuals who have dedicated a good portion of our personal and professional lives to this cause. We are Baltimore City residents. We are not new to this work. We are true to this work. We are hands-on. We believe that this is something that's necessary. So with that said, the group of us, we sat down and we voted on priorities that were important to not only us, but our community. We are all Baltimore City residents, which means the things that you see within that RFP are things that we know that the community needs because we are the community. So we just encourage you to really sit down and be conscious about how you apply for this. Look at it from a perspective of it being something that's going to benefit the community. Take your time through the process. Put as much love and care into it as we have. The meetings are love and care filled meetings. We don't play about this, and we really believe that this is something that is serious and important for our community. We're excited to read and kind of review your proposals, and thank you for being willing to take the step to do this type of work. It's not easy work, but we appreciate the people that want to do this work and are eager for the funds to continue the work. Thank you so much, y'all.
Thank you, Paris and Charles. I think you both really encapsulated not just the work of the RAB, but the way the city sees these funds and this RFP and our collective mission here, which really I think is what brings us all together here today, is this collective mission to solve the opioid crisis in Baltimore City and to help save lives and improve the lives of residents across the city. So thank you for the work of the RAB in helping us get to this point. And we're really excited for everyone on the call for the applications to come in and see how we can continue to partner and work together and fund some of the amazing programs within the city. So now we're going to move on to the background section, and I'm just going to give a little bit of context to why we're here and what this all means for the RFP. So in 2018, Baltimore City initiated legal action against various companies involved in contributing to the overdose crisis here in Baltimore. These are the pharmaceutical manufacturers, distributors, pharmacies, and other companies that had an impact here in Baltimore. The city, through litigation, reached settlements and awards totaling $579.9 million with these companies, which is a substantial amount of funding for the city. On August 29th, 2024, Mayor Scott issued an executive order that established the Opioid Restitution Fund and outlined a framework for administering the funds in the Opioid Restitution Fund. And part of this process in the executive order was to ensure that there is transparency, accountability, and community involvement. And what that means is that there is transparency of where and how funds are being spent, that there is accountability for the dollars that they are going towards interventions that are rooted in data and that will have a positive impact on the city, and that we're involving community members. So those who are directly impacted by the crisis, like individuals who have an opioid use disorder or families or loved ones who have been impacted. But also this is all residents of Baltimore City, because the mayor says that there's not a single person in Baltimore City that has not been impacted by this crisis. And so the Restitution Advisory Board is one way that we are involving community, but there is also a variety of other mechanisms that the Restitution Advisory Board and the city are using to ensure that we are hearing all voices. From all of that, the community grant, which we're here to talk about today. So for Baltimore City's fiscal year 2026, $2 million was allocated from the Opioid Restitution Fund for community grants that will go through a request for proposal or RFP process, which was developed and supported by the Restitution Advisory Board. So we've heard folks reference the strategic plan already, but as part of the mayor's executive order, he outlined that the city was required to create a plan for how we would address the opioid crisis that was rooted in data. And so the first step of the strategic plan was that the Baltimore City Health Department created and completed a comprehensive assessment of the needs and the strengths of the city's existing response to the overdose crisis. And through this process, they came up with 5 key recommendations for the city. Those recommendations became the basis for the overdose response strategic plan. And this strategic plan is really our North Star for the city's priorities and activities that will be funded, but also the goal of the strategic plan is really to bring us all together. And this is city officials, city agencies, but also community-based organizations, everyone in the city that is working or touched by this. We all want to kind of come together around this overdose response strategic plan. And so I'll just, they're on the screen, but want to list that these are the key priorities for the strategic plan, is to help those most at risk by addressing disparities, racial, sex and age-based disparities for the overdose crisis, ensuring that services work together to dismantle silos and improve coordination across the systems. We want to confront stigma in services, policy, and public perception so that people feel safe and welcome in asking for help. We want to increase access to low barrier services, particularly in underserved neighborhoods, and improve the quality of our services across the city so that individuals can receive the assistance that they need and have it be a quality service that is going to meet their needs. So based on the strategic plan, you heard Charles and Paris talk about this, that the Restitution Advisory Board looked at the different activities and strategies within the strategic plan and came up with 3 kind of areas that they would like to fund. These 3 tiers will be the funding awards for the community grants. And they can support projects for up to 2 years. So I'll start with tier 3, and this funding range will be up to $500,000, will be awarded for programs that increase availability to low barrier or easy to access mobile treatment services, specifically in geographic regions that are disproportionately affected by the overdose crisis, but that may not have the number of services, existing services to meet the need. Tier 3 funding must include robust harm reduction services, since we know that harm reduction is critical in all stages of someone's journey. And based on this funding range, we are approximating that 2 to 3 tier 3 awards will be funded, but this number will depend on the number of quality applications that we receive. Tier 2 grants will be for up to $250,000 and will be awarded to initiatives that increase access to a full array of low barrier or easy to access harm reduction services, including things like naloxone distribution, drug checking, syringe service programs, wound care, and other evidence-based harm reduction strategies. Tier 2 funding must include robust harm reduction services, so not just naloxone distribution, but we really want to think about comprehensive harm reduction services. Based on this funding range, we approximate that 2 to 4 Tier 2 awards will receive funding, but this will depend on the number of quality applicants that we receive. And then finally, Tier 1 grants will be up to $50,000 and will be awarded to projects that increase access to low barrier or easy to access social support services, like connections to housing, transportation, food assistance, education, or employment for people who use drugs and people with substance use disorders. Approximately 3 to 6 Tier 1 awards will receive funding, depending on the number of quality applications that we receive. And here is the timeline for this grant. We announced the availability of this funding on October 10th. And then on October 23rd, the RFP formally launched on the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs website. Today and tomorrow, we are hosting 2 virtual orientation sessions for interested organizations. These will be recorded, and as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, the recording will be posted online for anyone to access who was unable to attend either of those dates, or for those that want to revisit anything that was mentioned in this meeting. The initial proposals will be due by 11:59 p.m. on November 23rd. These proposals will be reviewed and scored by the Restitution Advisory Board. And just a quick reminder that the board members have disclosed any conflicts of interest that they have and will not be scoring applications for which they have a conflict. Submitting organizations will be notified on December 11th if they are being asked to proceed to a full application. The full application will ask more specific questions and gather additional details about implementation of the proposed project and budget for the proposed project. Those full applications will be due on January 25th, at which point the Restitution Advisory Board will review them and make their funding recommendations that will go to the mayor. Award announcements will be made sometime in February of 2026. And now I will pass it over to Gan Anderson from the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs to talk about the grant requirements.
Morning, everyone. So as Sarah said, I am Gan Anderson with the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. I am a project manager supporting the Opioid Restitution Fund administration. So for the requirements, and these are also outlined in the request for proposals documents that can be found on our website, which is arp.baltimorecity.gov/ORF. So for organizations who are submitting, they must not be for profit. So they must be a nonprofit organization. And for those who are applying for Tier 2 and Tier 3 awards, they must also have official 501c3 status. All organizations must be in good financial standing and have a valid employer identification number, EIN, so they must be registered formally. They must not have already received funding or be earmarked to receive funds in fiscal year 26 from Baltimore City's Opioid Restitution Fund, so they cannot be one of the named organizations in the settlement agreements. And they must have proven experience in Baltimore City, including an operating location in Baltimore City and experience directly serving people in Baltimore City, with direct experience serving populations impacted by the opioid overdose crisis in existing programs. So they must have proven experience. For the eligible uses are also linked to the strategic plan that Sarah outlined during her presentation, but they must be programs, services, and supports that address substance use prevention, treatment, recovery, and harm reduction, including the social determinants of health as outlined in the executive order. or infrastructure required for such programs, services, and supports. Use can also be for oversight, planning, assessing, and monitoring of programs and expenses associated with managing, investing, dispersing monies in the fund. They can be for evaluations of effectiveness and outcomes. They must clearly be aligned with the strategic plan. And specifically for this RFP, the Restitution Advisory Board outlined that they cannot be used for unallowable costs that are outlined in Appendix A of the applicant information document, but basically they cannot be used for law enforcement centered or carceral approaches, coercive or abstinence-only programs, stigmatizing or discriminatory practices, indirect or overhead costs over 15%, or services or supplies already funded through statewide settlements. And if you would like further examples or information, you can access this in Appendix A found on the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs website. So the process, Sarah went into a little bit when she outlined the timeline, but basically before you submit a proposal with your organization, you should self-screen for eligibility and ensure that you meet the eligibility requirements that we outlined. You should think about whether you need any partner organizations to implement the work effectively. You should decide to submit a proposal with any decision makers at your organization, be that leadership or your board. And then, if necessary, combine efforts with partner organizations to develop a proposal. You can then submit the proposal in our proposal submission portal that my colleague will walk through a little bit later. Then you will receive an eligibility decision based on an eligibility questionnaire. After you've submitted a proposal, the Restitution Advisory Board Review Committee will score the proposals, and then the full Restitution Advisory Board will review the proposals and decide which ones will advance to application. After they have decided which ones will be advanced or which ones will be declined, those that advance will submit a full application, and then that application will be approved or declined by city leadership, by the mayor or the city administrator or their designee. After that, the agreements will be signed and the organizations will receive funding. So before you submit your proposal, please think about whether the proposal is responsive to the requirements outlined in the Notice of Funding Opportunity announcement, if there are other funding sources available for it, how your organization will sustain this effort once the Opioid Restitution Fund expires, if your organization has the administrative capacity to adhere to the mandatory reporting requirements, and ensuring that this funding would not be considered a duplication of benefits, that the organization or that your proposed activities are not already funded via another funding source. So now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Lauren Jackson, who will talk through the application portal.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gayan. Again, my name is Lauren Jackson. I'm the Deputy Director with the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, and I'm going to walk folks through our application portal. So as was mentioned earlier, the application portal opened up on October 23rd. So hopefully some folks have had the opportunity to get in there and check it out. If not, now is the perfect time. So this first slide here shows the screenshot of what the portal will look like when you first go to log in. Again, the link is on our website, arp.baltimorecity.gov/ORF. So you'll be able to, as you see here, create a new account. This will require you to enter information regarding your organization as well as your personal information and create a password. After that, you will receive an email from the system to confirm your account creation. As you'll be setting up your organization, there will also be an opportunity for multiple folks to collaborate on applications. So different folks from your organization can all apply, can all have their own username, and can all work on the same application. Once you have registered, you will get a screen that looks a lot like this. As you can see towards the top left, there'll be a button that says apply. You'll be able to click that, and something very similar to what we have here will show up. The first part of our proposal, as mentioned, is the eligibility quiz. So what you'll do once you get to this screen is you will click on check eligibility, and it will bring up 3 questions that we have on the next slide. So again, as mentioned, there are certain eligibility criteria that are required to apply for these funds. The first, your organization must be a nonprofit or a community-based organization. The second, your organization must not be named in the Baltimore City Opioid Settlement Agreements to receive funding this year. And then next, does your organization have an operating location in Baltimore City? Again, you must have an operating location in Baltimore City. If you meet all of these eligibility requirements, you will get a button that says continue that will allow you to apply. If you are not eligible, you will not be able to access the application. Once you've done that, you'll see this screen come up. I just want to emphasize here, you see the date at the bottom left that says closes January 25th, 2026. This is for the entire process. Proposals must be submitted by November 23rd, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. So again, you have this next month to get these applications in, or these proposals, I should say, in and submitted. So you'll be able to click the apply button and see all of the questions, fill those out, and once that is completed, you'll be able to click a button that says submit LOI. This is just the portal's acronym for letter of interest or proposal. This is just an overview of the proposal scoring criteria. These are all available in even more detail, again, on our website with those detailed instructions. There are also several appendices that include additional information about this opportunity, including detailed information about the proposal scoring criteria. I will emphasize that the proposal scoring criteria and the application scoring criteria are different. So please make sure to pay attention to these as you are crafting your proposal. Reviewers will be looking at each of these criteria and rating your proposal against them. Proposals receiving an average score of 80 points and above will then be shared with the entire Restitution Advisory Board, who will then select those to move on to full application. As indicated, it is our intention that folks moving to full application will be notified by December 11th that they are moving forward, and at that time, an additional training will take place for those folks who move to application. Next slide. All right, just a quick overview of communications and expectations before we move into our Q&A. So once you are registered, not only will you get your email letting you know that your username has been set up, but once you click that submit LOI button, you will get a notification that your proposal has been received. If you do not receive one, again, feel free to reach out to us at MORP@baltimorecity.gov or Overdose response@baltimorecity.gov to confirm, and you will also receive an email notification to indicate whether you have been declined or if you have been selected to advance to the application phase. Again, those who do move forward to application will be informed of application training opportunities. It will be much like today, except for more detailed information as far as the application goes, and only for those who are selected to move forward. Organizations, once an application is submitted, will again be informed once it has been received in the portal. The portal for the application will be the same as it is for the proposal. And then again, if they have been declined or selected for an award. Again, we encourage folks to check our website, arp.baltimorecity.gov/ORF, for all of the detailed information that we have available regarding the RFP, for a copy of these slides and a recording of today's presentation, as well as an FAQ sheet. You can also, again, reach us with questions at Overdose response@baltimorecity.gov or MORP@baltimorecity.gov. And we ask that you, of course, please share this opportunity with your networks, associations, and collectives so we can assure that as many folks as possible are applying for these funds so they can reach the residents of Baltimore. And I think with that, we will move into our Q&A session. So we were recording questions back, and I believe our first question was, what is your definition of community grants? If you want to take this first one, Sarah.
Sure. And I also saw the comment that I was hard to hear. So I'm going to get closer to my microphone because it is turned up as loud as possible. So hopefully this is better. Community grants was really just our way of differentiating between the named organizations and then this call for community-based organizations to submit proposals for a competitive RFP. So this is for organizations that are working in the community.
Okay. And then our next question, what tier does public education fall into?
So the tiers, I think, are pretty specific in the types of programs and activities that would need to be submitted for. I think public education could potentially be tied to any of those tiers, but the RAB specifically looked for specific activities within the tiers, again, connection to mobile treatment, to comprehensive harm reduction services, and then connections to social supports. And so I think if you can't find a way, public education is like pretty broad, so I don't know exactly what you mean by that question, but if it's not explicitly in the tier and there isn't a connection to the activities within the tier, I think that public education might not be appropriate for this round of funding.
Thanks, Sarah. The next question we have, can institutions of higher education apply? So from an eligibility perspective, I would say, again, the requirement is that you're a community organization or a 501c3. If you feel like your higher education institute meets that threshold, then I would say yes, you can apply. Again, if you apply for your tier 2 or 3, you must have 501c3 status. All right. The next question seems to be specific. So SEER Neurotherapeutics is a Baltimore headquartered biotechnology company developing non-addictive, non-opioid chronic pain relieving medications. Will future requests for proposals support development of opioid alternatives for safe pain relief?
So our process for identifying areas of need for future RFPs will be similar to this one, where we'll look at the data through the comprehensive needs assessment, which will be completed every 2 years, and then updates will be made to the overdose response strategic plan. And then funding will be based on the overdose response strategic plan. So I can't speak to what future RFPs will look like. But I think that's something that is interesting, and if that comes up as a need in the needs assessment and is baked into the overdose response strategic plan, and then is identified as a priority area for funding by the Restitution Advisory Board, it may. But again, we can't speak to what future proposals, requests for proposals may look like.
Thanks, Sarah. I think likely this next question is similar, but I'll ask it just in case there's anything specific here. Will there be additional grant funds available focused on increasing access to medication for opioid use disorder across systems of care? Strategy 11.
So this one, as you name, is already in our strategic plan, was not a priority area identified by the Restitution Advisory Board for this round of funding. But again, I think as you mentioned in your question, this is the first of hopefully many grants that we can give out with this funding. So if it is identified as a priority or an area of need for funding, it could potentially be, since it is already in our strategic plan.
Thank you. All right. Can organizations submit different applications under different categories? So I would say, yes, organizations can submit multiple applications, though we will not fund multiple projects per one organization. So you can submit multiple applications, but you will not have multiple proposals selected. The second part of that question, if an organization submits an application under a partnership with a lead partner, would this prohibit subgrantees from applying for a wholly and separate distinct grant? No, that would not prohibit subgrantees from also applying from a grant as well. The next question, are fiscally sponsored organizations eligible? Yes, they are. The next question, how do we find out if our agency was named in the settlement agreement? Question 2, to see if we qualify to apply for the grant.
So if organizations were named, there was a press announcement that went out, and those organizations were notified, and they are all working already with the Mayor's Office of Overdose Response and the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs to enter into grant agreements for their funds. So I think if you were named, you should hopefully know, but I will also look and drop the press announcement in the chat.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, is there a page limitation for our proposal? So there are word limits or character limits, I should say, in each of the sections of the proposal. The next question, is there a way to attach our application in PDF form, or is it inline answers typed directly into the portal only? So it is inline answers typed directly into the portal only. There is a section where you can upload additional information as desired. Gayan, do we remember what the file limit for that is?
I think 10 megabytes.
So 10 megabytes. So if you had, some additional supporting documentation you wanted to upload as part of your proposal, you could do that in that section. All right. This one has 2 questions. Are there specific geographic areas we're restricted to for mobile services? Is the purchase of a vehicle or van allowable?
So I can take the first part of that question. You are not restricted, but we do encourage you in your proposal to highlight the areas or encourage you to have services in your proposal be around geographic areas with specific needs, and you can find that data on within the needs assessment of the neighborhoods that are disproportionately impacted. But one of the things that I think is why we're leaning towards mobile services is that they can move when the data changes. And so as our areas of need change, mobile services are more nimble and can move with the need.
For the purchase of a vehicle or van, there is a full outline of what is allowable and unallowable in Appendix A, including, I would look under the indirect cost section. That would be where that was included. So you can search for all of the items that are specifically allowable or unallowable. Well, if it's not on the unallowable list, then it is allowable.
Thanks, Dan. Will new established nonprofits be considered for funding? So I will say to this, again, there is an expectation that you have an operating location in Baltimore City. You know, whether that is your own brick and mortar or if you're operating out of community centers, churches, other, you know, trusted locations in the community, that's okay. And there are questions in the proposal criteria related to, you know, a track record of providing services. So I think it depends if you're able to show that a newly established nonprofit, depending on your definition of new, meets the threshold for those two criteria. All right. Would it be okay to partner with organizations that are for-profit, or does everyone involved in providing the services need to be a nonprofit entity? I would say it's okay to partner with organizations that are for-profit, but funding should not be benefiting those for-profit organizations. Do CBOs, nonprofits, need to establish ORPs prior to applying?
So not necessarily. You don't need to be an established overdose response program. However, that is one of our activities within our strategic plan, is to increase the number of ORPs within the city. And so if you are not an ORP and you're applying for tier 2, where you will be applying for funds around comprehensive harm reduction services, I think having a clear avenue of how you will be, let's say, like procuring your naloxone or testing strips or other things like that. So I think weighing those two things of like having a clear strategy for how you will be getting those harm reduction supplies. And also we encourage organizations to become ORPs. So you don't have to be, but we encourage it.
Thanks, Sarah. A question, can you clarify the timeline again for the award? I believe you indicated that funds would support programming for 2 years, but wanted to make sure I heard that correctly. So yes, you can apply for funding to cover a period of up to 2 years. Again, the tier amount, the upper amount of $500,000 is the maximum award available. So that is not a per fiscal year award amount. It is $500,000. So again, you can stretch whatever tier of funding you're applying for across those years. So again, yes, you can apply for funding to cover 2 years. The next question, I'm with the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. Are we able to apply for the grant? I'll have Sarah weigh in here as well, but I do not believe that city agencies or quasi-agencies are eligible to apply for this funding.
So city agencies were allocated funding as part of their fiscal 26, and then will also, as we look at fiscal 27 budgets, there will be allocations for potential projects out of the fiscal 27 budget. So maybe you could email us separately and we'll have a conversation about what that might look like for FY 27.
All right. Can you begin your proposal, save, and then resume later for final submission? Yes, that is possible. And again, multiple folks can collaborate on it, so folks can be editing the proposal prior to submission. Right. We have a question. Can you partner with an organization that is named in the settlement? Okay, and I know we had this question earlier.
Sarah, do you have?
So we encourage partnership. Again, one of the strategies, one of the priority areas within the strategic plan is breaking down those silos. And so we encourage all applicants to find partnerships within the community. So I think that we would be open to applications that engage partnerships with organizations, even if they are named in settlement. But I think how much of a proposed amount might be like subawarded out to that organization might be like a flag for us.
Thanks, Sarah. Will these questions and responses be available to view? So yes, again, a recording of this presentation with audio will be available to listen to, and then we will capture these questions in the frequently asked questions document that will also be posted on the Recovery Office's website. I did see a follow-up question about HABC having a nonprofit arm. I would still say since HABC does get appropriated funds through the city's budgeting process, at least a portion, to just please reach out to Sarah in our office and we can have a conversation about that. All right. What are the financial documents required to submit? Gayan, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, they're outlined in the portal and in the question document, but you'll need to provide information about your most recent operating budget, annual, as well as any recent financial audits or information about any findings in your audits, and then ensuring that you're in good standing with the state. So I see there's another question after about SSTAT and whether the printout of the lookup is fine, which it is. You do not need to purchase the formal document. And then there are questions about a general overview of what you plan to include for your budgeted activities and how your budget will be allocated across activities, not necessarily in a detailed budget, but in broad strokes, how you plan to spend the money that you are applying for. So you'll be able to see all of the required financial documents in the portal and also in the appendix that outlines all of the questions required. If you want more specifics, but that's a general overview of the financial documents required.
All right. If folks have additional questions, please go ahead and drop those in the chat now while we have a few more minutes. Again, I'll go ahead and drop again the link to our website, which includes quite a few of the items we've talked about today, as well as the link for the application. I'll also just emphasize, I know the question came up earlier in the chat and I responded there, but this training is the same as tomorrow evening's training. So if you attended today, there's no requirement. The information will be very similar. Any questions that come up in that training that were not covered here will also be added to the FAQ document. The next question, are you able to review the application without submission, going through each section? So yes, after you get through the eligibility section, you can view all of the questions in the proposal. You cannot view the questions in the application without submitting the proposal and being elected to move forward to the application stage. Any other questions? We can hang on for a few more minutes as folks think of things. Or if the BCMOOR team RAB members if any folks have anything to add that they think would be useful to share with potential applicants.
I'll just emphasize in the chat that if other questions about the application pop up, you can send those questions to overdoseresponse@baltimorecity.gov, and we will get back to you.
Thanks, Sarah. There's a question regarding food. I have a food truck and feed many organizations for over 3 years. Can I work more than one? If you could provide some clarity about that question, that would be helpful. And then regarding when the FAQ will be posted, we'll work on that today and tomorrow after tomorrow's training session. So I would imagine ideally sometime Wednesday or Thursday.
There's also actually an initial FAQ already posted in the appendix section on the Recovery Office website. So you can already access a number of responses to, existing frequently asked questions that we had. And then they will be updated, as Lauren said, later this week with the questions from these 2 sessions.
Okay. Thanks for the question. Should the proposal be very detailed or standard as the application process is applicable to what's in the proposal? I would say to answer the questions in the proposal with as much detail as you have, again, paying attention to the proposal scoring criteria. The application process will ask questions that will help you build on what's been submitted in the proposal, so that will require more detail. But I would say as much detail that you can provide in your proposal as possible would definitely be appreciated and would help those reviewing the proposal. Another question here, will both proposals be considered if an organization is the primary applicant on one and a partner on the other? I would say yes, they will both be considered. That does not, being a partner organization for one and a primary organization on another does not make one of the proposals ineligible for review. Can partnering organizations be new CBOs? So I think, yes, that is possible. We are at 10:55. Any last minute burning questions before we wrap up for this training session? All right. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much again to Sarah and the BCMOOR team and to our RAB members. We will be monitoring those email addresses we provided, so please reach out with any additional questions.
Thanks, everyone. We can move into the question. So I'm going to scroll back to the chat. So the first question, can you please differentiate between an operational location and a physical location? Will we need a brick and mortar location? So no, your organization does not need to own a brick and mortar location. You just need to have a history of, again, serving folks in Baltimore City. So if you have a partner organization where you work out of their location, if you work out of churches, community centers, that is also acceptable. Okay.
Moving on to the next question. All right, so the next question. An unallowable use is large construction projects. How are large construction projects defined? So this question, we will make sure to get a response to you shortly on this one. We'll come back to this question. The next question, the only organizations allowed to apply are nonprofit. So that is not true. To apply for funding for tier 2 or tier 3, your organization must have 501c3 status. But if you want to apply for tier 1 grants, you do not need to have 501c3 status or be a nonprofit. You just need to be a community-based organization. Okay. Is an organization whose location is closed for construction still eligible if they can run the program from a partner location or remotely, asking for a tier 1 applicant? So yes, again, partner locations, as long as those are in Baltimore City, are eligible. Okay. Will a lead organization still be considered if one of its partner organizations a past grantee? So I believe I'm interpreting this correctly, but if I'm not, please clarify in the chat. But if an organization is applying and their partnering organization is a named entity, they will still be considered. Again, please place all questions in the chat and we'll make sure we get to all of them as we're moving through them. Is this funding for only Baltimore City, or is it possible for residents in Edgewood, Harford County to benefit from this grant? If this fund is only for Baltimore residents, how can an organization in Edgewood, Harford get funding to support people in need? So yes, this funding is only for Baltimore City. Again, for programs operating out of Baltimore City. I will just reiterate that yes, folks will be able to receive a copy of this PowerPoint presentation and a recording. Again, that will be available at arp.baltimorecity.gov/ORF. The next question, can this grant be used for youth programs that offer substance use services? So Sarah, I'll let you speak to this one.
Can you repeat it, Lauren?
Yep, absolutely. Can this grant be used for youth programs that offer substance use services?
Yes. So one of the populations identified in the needs assessment as a population with specific need is for youth. I think just looking at the tiers and seeing what tier you would apply for a youth substance use program. Is it for mobile treatment? Is it around harm reduction? Or is it connection to other social supportive services? Again, I think for all folks interested in applying, just to bring it back to the tiers and what each tier will allow in terms of activity. They're pretty specific. So just like looking to that and what types of activities your proposal would include.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Question, will responses to questions be made available to all potential applicants? So yes, we currently have an FAQ document that is available on our website. We are also updating that document to reflect all questions that were asked and answered during yesterday's session, as well as today's training session. So that will be available this week. So the clarification regarding a past grantee, if they've been awarded previously. So because of how new ORF funding is, I do not believe there are any grantees other than those named entities. But Sarah, please correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct, Lauren. This is the first grant for the ORF other than those named organizations.
Okay, next question. Are the requirements for joint venture collaboration for organizations that may want to do a collective funding? So what I will say here, and again, please clarify if I'm not correctly addressing your question. The application portal requires that there is one organization who is submitting it, but there is an opportunity to clearly lay out all of the partnerships that you're planning to utilize during your grant period. Also, for organizations using fiscal agents or for those applying jointly, you can all be named as parties to the grant agreement. So for example, when the Mayor's Office of Recovery Program, should you be awarded, executes your grant agreement, that grant agreement can be with more than one party. All right, the next question. Would a hybrid company that is a for-profit and nonprofit be allowed to apply for tier 2 or 3 if the financials are more outlining the for-profit company? So again, please correct me if I'm not addressing this, but an organization that does have a for-profit arm but has a nonprofit arm is still allowed to apply. But again, please be clear in your proposal the role of the nonprofit and the role of the for-profit and who these funds are benefiting ultimately. The next question, are you able to apply for all tiers if you're partner with someone who's qualified? So yes, again, you can use a fiscal agent or a lead organization can apply, and if they have 501c3 status, they are eligible to apply for all 3 tiers. Would a nonprofit company located in Harford County be able to apply with a for-profit company that has the Baltimore City location and services? I think it would depend on the relationship between the two, but if the nonprofit company is operating out of the for-profit company, then yes, they would be eligible. A copy of this session will be available on our website, so I will post that in the chat one more time. So if folks could just check back on our website this week, we will work to get a copy up as soon as possible. Again, a copy of the FAQs will also be available, so I will share that document, which will be updated this week as well, to include all questions and answers from today and yesterday's session. Any other questions that folks want to drop into the chat? All right. I'll ask the BCMOOR team, Gayan, if there's anything I missed. Oh, we've got 2 more coming in. What if you don't have a nonprofit but substance abuse that services Baltimore City? So again, nonprofit 501c3 status is only required to apply for tier 2 or tier 3 funding, so you can be a community-based organization and still apply for tier 1 funding. And then another question, will additional funding opportunities come over the next few years? I believe yes, but Sarah, if you want to expand on that as well.
Yes, so this is the first funding opportunity out of the ORF. We will continue as we get our budgets for the next fiscal year. We'll have more understanding of like what our budget looks like for subsequent years. But this process is one that we are looking at long term. And for those that aren't familiar with the mayor's executive order, he outlined that the Opioid Restitution Fund has to sustain for 15 years, at least 15 years. So we are, hoping that these dollars are around to sustain supports for addressing the overdose crisis for many years.
Any additional questions? All right. Anything from the BCMOOR team, Sarah?
Looks like
Yeah, if we want to
Dominic.
go back to the previous question about capital projects, I just want to note again to look at the three funding tiers. I think they are pretty focused on service delivery, and we know that capital projects can take a long time, especially large scale ones, per the language in the RFP. The goal of this round of funding is really focused on getting services out into the community. We know that, and I know all of you are aware of this as well because of the work that you do, that we need to amplify the great work that you are doing. So really thinking about expanding services, the award amounts, so thinking about capital projects that help with that service delivery. Again, so kind of like balancing that, like this award amount is for up to 2 years, and thinking about like what can accomplish in 2 years and how we expand existing service delivery. So I think that is how the RAB is outlining large scale capital projects balanced with the tiers and the services outlined in the tiers. We want these dollars to have an immediate impact in our communities.
Thanks, Sarah. And I know I've seen a few hands go up. So again, if folks can drop those questions in the chat. If for some reason you do not have access to the chat, or you don't want to ask your question publicly right now, all questions can be emailed to overdoseresponse@baltimorecity.gov or MORP@baltimorecity.gov, and we can make sure we get those questions answered. Any other questions? I'll give folks another minute. And if not, again, everything is available on our website. All of the responses from today and yesterday will be available there as well very shortly.
Thanks everybody for your interest in this RFP. We're really excited and really appreciate you all turning out at 6 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you, everyone.